Dara Omisanya hurried down the busy hallway of the Grand Crystal Hotel, clutching her cleaning cart. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, her uniform stained from hours of non-stop work. She hadn't slept well in days. Her brother's hospital bills were piling up, and every double shift felt like a mountain she had to climb alone. She glanced at her checklist. Next up, Presidential Suite 1503. Meanwhile, Kairo Adelaya stepped out of his luxury car and into the cool, marble lobby of the same hotel. The young tech billionaire had flown in from Dubai for a high-stakes business deal. Investors were waiting. The future of his latest AI company hung in the balance. But his mood was foul. His private jet had been delayed. His assistant had mixed up his schedule, and now his suite wasn't ready. As he marched down the hallway, phone glued to his ear, fate intervened. Dara, lost in her task, didn't hear him coming. She turned the corner with her mop bucket, just as Kairo stormed around the same bend. Crash! Dirty water splashed onto Kairo's designer shoes and the hem of his crisp white shirt. The phone slipped from his hand. For a moment, everything stopped. Dara gasped, eyes wide with panic. Oh no, oh my God, sir. I'm so sorry. Kairo's sharp eyes narrowed. Do you even know what you've just done? He growled. I didn't see you. Please forgive me. Dara stammered, trembling. Hotel staff turned to watch. Kairo's voice was low but deadly. This suit costs more than your salary for the year. Humiliation burned in Dara's chest. She lowered her head. It was an accident, sir. Kairo didn't respond. He simply stepped past her, dripping and furious. Back in the suite as he changed into fresh clothes, he muttered under his breath, This trip is cursed. Little did he know, the girl who had just ruined his day would soon turn his life upside down. Dara worked the rest of her shift with trembling hands and a lump in her throat. The staff whispers followed her everywhere. You splashed water on Kairo Adelaya? Girl, are you crazy? But she couldn't worry about gossip. Her brother Sei was running out of medicine. She had to keep this job, no matter what. That evening, she was assigned to clean the upper floors again. Her supervisor handed her a room card. Suite 1503. The guest has stepped out. Be quick and thorough. Dara nodded, took a deep breath, and rode the elevator in silence. She still hadn't realized it was the same suite from the earlier collision. Inside, the room was large, modern, and silent, lit only by the fading sunset through the glass walls. Dara moved quietly, wiping surfaces and fluffing pillows. Her legs ached, her eyes burned. When she got to the master bedroom, her body gave up. Just a few minutes, she told herself. She sat on the edge of the massive bed, just to rest. Her eyes closed. She never meant to fall asleep. Kairo returned late, irritated and exhausted. The business dinner had gone worse than expected. The investors had been distracted. His mood was even darker than before. He pushed open the door to his suite, loosened his tie, and froze. Someone was in his bed. Not a thief, not a fan. A hotel cleaner, fast asleep, curled up on his sheets, a feather duster still loosely gripped in her hand. His eyes widened. What the hell? Storming across the room. He grabbed her shoulder and shook it. Dara startled awake, heart hammering against her ribs. No! I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. Please don't. Kairo's voice sliced through her panic. What are you doing here? Are you insane? Tears welled instantly in her eyes. I was tired. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize. I didn't mean to fall asleep. Please. Please don't fire me. He froze. Recognition clicked into place. Her. The same girl from the hallway. The mop water. The chaos. His anger surged, but then faltered. There was something in her face. Not just fear. Not just shame. Exhaustion. Real. Soul-deep exhaustion. Still, pride held him rigid. Get out, he said, voice like ice. Dara scrambled up, nearly tripping in her haste to flee. The door closed behind her with a quiet thud. Kairo stood there, unmoving, then slowly sat on the edge of the bed she had just left. Jaw tight, fist clenched. Who was this girl? And why was she getting under his skin? Dara's heart pounded as she hurried down the hallway. Her legs felt like jelly by the time she reached the staff quarters. She didn't even notice the curious looks from the other workers. In the locker room, she dropped onto a bench and buried her face in her hands. Her fingers still smelled like the hotel's lemon-scented polish. Her cheeks burned with shame. How could she have fallen asleep in a guest's bed? Not just any guest. Kairo Adelaya, a billionaire, a tech genius, a VIP at the hotel. She was sure she'd be fired. Moments later, her supervisor stormed in, waving a clipboard. "Dara, what have you done?" "I didn't mean to—" "You fell asleep in his bed? Do you know how lucky you are he didn't call the police?" "I swear it was an accident." "I don't want excuses. He said you were never to clean his suite again, ever." Dara nodded quickly, her voice soft. "Yes, ma'am." The supervisor sighed. "He didn't fire you. Count yourself lucky. But don't mess up again." "Understood," Dara whispered. That night she didn't go home right away. She went to the nearby public hospital, where her little brother Sei lay asleep, pale and weak. She gently brushed a curl from his forehead, her own fears pushed aside by the sound of his shallow breathing. Back at the hotel, Kairo stood by the window of his suite, looking out at the city lights. The skyline sparkled like glass. He had tried to forget her. That strange, quiet girl who had ruined his day, and then slept in his bed like it was her own. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who works so hard they pass out? What kind of life does someone like that live? He opened his tablet and stared at a financial report. But the numbers didn't make sense anymore. Kairo closed it, leaned back and sighed. "There's something about her," he muttered. Something he didn't understand, and didn't want to feel. Not yet. The next morning, Dara arrived early for her shift, eyes heavy from another sleepless night. She braced herself for more whispers, more shame. But to her surprise, the hotel staff acted strangely quiet around her. No teasing, no giggles. In fact, they avoided her altogether. It wasn't until she reached the back kitchen that her supervisor approached her again. This time with a puzzled expression. "You've been specially requested." Dara blinked. "What?" "Room service, Suite 1503. Mr. Adelaya asked for you by name." She froze. "Why would he—" The supervisor shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. Just deliver the tray and come right back. And behave." Minutes later, Dara stood outside the door of the suite that haunted her dreams. She took a deep breath and knocked. Kairo opened the door himself. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly tousled. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who hadn't slept either. "Come in," he said simply. Dara stepped in quietly, keeping her eyes on the floor. She placed the tray down on the glass table, hands trembling. "I'm sorry again," she said softly. Kairo didn't answer at first. He poured a cup of coffee, then said, "You didn't get fired." "No, sir." "You're lucky." "Yes, sir." Then silence, until he spoke again. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Dara. Dara Omisanya." He looked at her for a long moment. "Do you always work this hard?" Dara's eyes darted up, confused. "Yes, sir. I don't have much of a choice." Kairo nodded slowly. "That much is clear." He picked up a small envelope from the table and handed it to her. "For you." Dara hesitated. "Sir, I can't—" "Take it," he interrupted. "It's just a tip." She opened it after she left the room. 100,000 naira, more than her salary for a whole month. She stared at the money, heart pounding. Why was he doing this? And what did he want in return? Later, in the locker room, the envelope lay beside her, unopened. The money could help. Say's medicine, a week of groceries, maybe even a little more. But her pride whispered warnings. Nothing comes for free. Not from people like him. Still, she finally made up her mind. She would keep the money, but she'd earn it. She would work harder than ever. Back at the hotel, the whispers had grown. Staff spoke in hushed tones when she passed. Some were curious. Others sneered. "What does he see in her?" One waitress muttered. "She's just a cleaner," someone else said. But Dara ignored them all. Later that afternoon, she was called again. "Room 1503. Her supervisor said, eyes sharp. "He asked for you again." Dara's heart thudded, but she nodded and walked toward the elevator. This time, Kairo greeted her at the door with a cup of tea in hand. "You're not scared of me anymore?" he asked, half smiling. "I'm still trying to understand you." she replied honestly. He motioned toward the window. Sit! Dara hesitated, then perched lightly on the edge of the chair. Tell me something, Kairo said. If you weren't cleaning hotel rooms, what would you be doing? Dara blinked. No one had ever asked her that. I wanted to study nursing, help people. But life got in the way. Kairo nodded, saying nothing. She shifted. Why are you being kind to me? He turned toward her, his voice calm but serious. I don't know. Maybe I just noticed you. Silence hung between them. Then, just as suddenly, he stood. You can go. Dara rose, confused. Okay, thank you, sir. As she reached the door, he said quietly, Next time, call me Kairo. She paused, nodded once and stepped into the hallway. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Dara exhaled, heart racing. She didn't understand what was happening, but something had shifted. A name, a window seat, and the smallest crack in a billionaire's wall. Dara returned home that night with bread in one hand, and the envelope still hidden in her pocket. Her younger brother, Sei, sat up weakly on the mattress, his eyes lighting up. You bought the good kind, he said, grinning despite the cough that followed. She smiled, ruffled his hair, and said, Today was strange. He chewed slowly. Strange good or strange bad? I don't know yet. She didn't mention the billionaire. She didn't talk about the whispers, just that someone tipped her more than she expected. Her brother didn't press. Dara looked around their small, cluttered room. Peeling walls, a cracked window, a bucket catching water from a leak. But tonight, they had bread and hope. Back at the Grand Crystal Hotel, Kairo stood by the balcony of his suite, untouched dinner on the table. The city lights flickered like stars fallen from the sky. His assistant had called earlier. Should I book your return to Dubai, sir? Kairo had paused. No, extend the suite, indefinitely. Sir? Just do it. He didn't know what he was doing anymore. This wasn't like him. He didn't get attached. He didn't linger. But there was something about Dara. Her quiet dignity, her fire hidden beneath exhaustion, that haunted him. The next day, Dara was called again. Same room, same tray. This time, when she knocked, the door opened to music playing softly from a speaker. Kairo sat near the window, reading something on his tablet. You're early? He said without looking up. I try not to be late, Dara replied, setting the tray down. He looked up, then pointed to a chair. Sit, just for a minute. She hesitated, but something in his tone made her obey. They sat in silence for a while. No business talk, no orders, just quiet. Finally, he asked, What do you do when you're not working? Try to survive, she said plainly. Kairo leaned back. You're honest? I have no reason not to be. He smiled faintly, then picked up a second cup and poured her tea. Without a word, he placed it in front of her. Dara stared at it. No one had ever poured her. She sipped slowly. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. It felt safe. Dara walked through the staff hallway later that day, still holding the warmth of the tea in her chest. She didn't know what Kairo was doing, or why he kept asking for her. But part of her, deep down, didn't want it to stop. At her locker, she found a folded note stuck between cleaning gloves. Meet me by the fountain, after your shift. Her hands had trembled when she found it. Her first instinct was to tear it up, throw it away, forget it ever existed. But she didn't. And that night, after her shift ended, Dara found herself standing by the hotel's garden fountain, moonlight dancing softly across the rippling water. Kairo was already there, waiting. No guards, no tie, just a plain gray sweater and jeans. You came, he said, voice low. I don't know why, Dara replied, standing a few steps away. He looked at her carefully. Do you trust me? No, she answered. But I don't think you're pretending either. Kairo gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. I wanted to see where you live. She blinked. Why? Because I don't want to just guess anymore. Silence. Then Dara said, I don't bring people there. I'm not people. That's the problem. They stood in that quiet tension for a while. Kairo stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. I'm not trying to fix you or change you. I just want to understand you. Dara looked away. Her voice cracked slightly. Most people like you don't try. I'm not most people. She met his gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then softly she said, Fine, tomorrow, after my shift. He smiled. Not the arrogant kind, but one filled with something softer. Thank you. As Dara walked home that night, her thoughts were a storm. What was she doing? This man lived in skyscrapers. She lived behind broken fences. He spoke in billions. She counted coins. But something about the way he looked at her made her feel like she wasn't invisible. And for once, she didn't want to disappear. The next day, Dara didn't eat. Her stomach turned too much to hold anything down. After her shift, she changed into her plainest dress, combed her hair, and wore the sandals with the least wear on them. When she stepped outside, Kairo was already by the hotel parking lot, leaning against a sleek black SUV. He didn't wear a suit this time. Just a button-down and slacks. No watch, no air of power. He smiled gently when he saw her. Ready? Dara hesitated, then nodded. The drive was quiet. She noticed he didn't speak until she did. This is the longest road I've ever taken with a stranger, she said finally. Maybe we're not strangers anymore. Dara glanced at him. His voice was soft, but there was a weight behind it. They reached her neighborhood just after sunset. The street lights flickered like they were too tired to glow. Children played in the dusty road, their laughter cutting through the hum of generators. Kairo stepped out without hesitation. You don't have to, Dara began. I want to. They walked slowly toward her building. The street narrowed. A few neighbors peered through windows. This is home, she said, voice low. They reached her door, a rusted sheet of metal with a bent handle. Kairo stood quietly as she unlocked it. Inside, her brother looked up from his blanket, eyes wide. Dara, who's that? Dara knelt beside him. A friend. Kairo nodded and waved. Hi, I'm Kairo. Say's eyes lit up. Like the tech guy from TV? Kairo laughed. Maybe. They didn't stay long. Kairo didn't push. He just stood near the window, watching how carefully Dara tucked Say in, how she straightened their tiny room like it mattered more than gold. On the way back, neither of them spoke, but as Kairo drove, he glanced at her and said, Thank you for showing me your world. Dara looked out the window. It's not much. It's real. That's more than I can say for mine. That night, Dara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, her world had been seen, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. The days passed in soft, silent shifts. Kairo still called for Dara, sometimes just for tea, sometimes for nothing at all. They spoke in fragments, questions and glances, no declarations, no promises, and yet something grew in the space between them. At work, Dara kept her head down. Whispers still followed her, some envious, others cruel. I heard she's moved into his room. She's just lucky, that's all. She'll fall soon. They always do. Dara didn't respond, not with words. Instead, she worked harder, cleaned better, smiled less. She wanted no favors. She needed no saving. Meanwhile, Kairo found himself distracted during meetings, restless during calls. His mind wandered when it shouldn't, and every time Dara knocked on his door, something unfamiliar settled over him. Not excitement, not desire. Calm. He told himself it wasn't serious. Just a passing thing. But he was lying, and he knew it. Then came the necklace. He had seen it while shopping for his mother. A thin silver chain, simple and elegant. Nothing flashy. Just like Dara. He bought it without thinking. But days passed, and he didn't give it to her. Until one evening he placed it in a small box beneath her folded laundry in the hotel service room. No note, no signature. When Dara found it, her breath caught. She opened the box slowly, heart pounding. It shimmered in the light, quiet and beautiful. She didn't need a note. She didn't need to ask. She already knew who had left it. That night she wore it beneath her uniform. No one saw, except him. The next morning when Dara brought breakfast to his suite, he noticed the chain peeking from her collar. She didn't mention it. Neither did he. But they shared a look. A quiet, steady look that said everything neither of them could. Still they didn't touch. Still they didn't speak of love. But both knew. They were standing at the edge of something deep and dangerous, and neither one wanted to step back. 3 weeks passed. To the world, Kairo Adelaya was still the polished billionaire with a sharp mind and colder heart. But inside Suite 1503, something had thawed. Every knock from Dara, every cup of tea shared, chipped away at the walls he'd spent years building. And every time he looked at her, really looked, he saw someone who never asked for his money, his name, or his world. Only his honesty. Then came the storm. It arrived in heels. Mrs. Adana Adelaya, his mother, flew into Lagos without warning. Tall, graceful, and fierce, she stepped into the hotel lobby with 2 assistants, 1 designer bag, and a gaze sharp enough to slice steel. She didn't need a room. She wanted answers. Kairo was in a business meeting when she barged into Suite 1503. The staff scrambled. The receptionist whispered, but no one stopped her. She looked around the suite, elegant, expensive, familiar, until she saw the food tray with 2 cups. The faint floral scent. A strand of unfamiliar hair on the couch pillow. She frowned. "Is there a woman?" Kairo didn't answer. She didn't push, not yet. But her eyes narrowed, and from that moment she began watching. Days later, standing near the lobby balcony, she saw it. Kairo, her son, the untouchable Adelaya heir, paused. Not for a call, not for a deal, but to smile at a hotel cleaner, a girl in a sky blue uniform with quiet eyes and a food tray in her hands. That was all she needed. Later that evening, Dara received a note. This time, not from Kairo. It was folded neatly with hotel letterhead. "You are invited for a private tea. Suite 1104, 4:30 p.m. Mrs. A. Adelaya." Dara stared at it, heart sinking. She didn't tell anyone, not even Kairo. When the time came, she changed into her cleanest uniform, brushed her hair, and walked to the door with legs made of air. Mrs. Adelaya opened the suite herself. She smiled, but her eyes did not. "Dara, isn't it?" Dara nodded. "Come, let's have a talk." The suite smelled of perfume and distance. On the table sat tea, untouched. Mrs. Adelaya motioned for Dara to sit. "I hear you've made quite the impression on my son." Dara lowered her gaze. "I didn't mean to. Let me be clear." The woman interrupted, her voice sweet and sharp. "This ends now." Dara's breath caught. "You are not his equal. You are a cleaner. Don't mistake kindness for permanence." She poured the tea slowly like poison. "You should leave while you still have your dignity." Then she reached into her designer bag and pulled out a white envelope. "This is enough money to start a new life, somewhere far from here, far from him." Dara looked at the envelope, then back at the woman. She stood up slowly. "I came here to work," she said quietly. "Not to beg, and not to be bought." She left the envelope on the table, untouched, and without another word she walked out. But inside something had cracked, and the next day, everything changed. Kairo woke early, got dressed before sunrise. He sat by the window pretending to read, listening for footsteps in the hallway, waiting for the knock he'd come to expect. But it never came. By 10, the silence grew too loud. He picked up the phone and called the kitchen. "Where's Dara?" There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. Then a quiet voice. "Sir, she didn't report for duty today." Kairo's chest tightened. "Check again." But deep down, he already knew. Something was wrong. He called her supervisor. The answer was the same. She turned in her badge last night, left quietly. Took her brother. No forwarding address. Kairo stood frozen, the line still active in his hand. Gone? Just like that? Kairo tore through the suite like a man chasing a ghost. The empty teacups, the folded laundry, a tiny forgotten button near the door. The scent she always left behind, faint jasmine, still lingered. He called her number. Switched off. He checked with staff. They knew nothing. No notes, no message, nothing. Later that night, Kairo sat alone in the dark, staring out the window. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass. Bright, busy but meaningless without her. Then his phone rang. It was his mother. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. The silence in his voice said enough. "I hope you've come to your senses," she said gently, but with steel beneath the words. He didn't answer. She continued. A man like you doesn't build a life with a girl like that. She was never meant to stay. She was a moment, Kairo. Not your future. His chest tightened. Had she done this? Had she driven Dara away? What did you say to her? He asked. I reminded her of the truth. No, you humiliated her. I protected you. I didn't need protecting. Her voice sharpened. She's just a cleaner. Kairo, have you forgotten who you are? She was more real than anyone I've ever met. The line went silent. Then her final words came cold and sure. You'll thank me later. He ended the call without another word. Not because he was done, but because she would never understand. That night he went to Dara's neighborhood, walked to the rusted door, knocked. A neighbor stepped out. They left late last night. No goodbye. Where did they go? The woman shook her head. Didn't say. Just carried a small bag and a sleeping child. Kairo stood there for a long time, the moon watching him. He had lost deals before, lost sleep, lost friends, but never like this. This loss felt personal, like a door had shut inside his chest. And the worst part? He didn't know if she'd ever come back. Kairo stopped attending meetings. He skipped a board presentation for the first time in his career. His team didn't understand it. Investors were confused. His assistant was panicking. But Kairo had one focus now. Finding Dara. He hired a private investigator, paid for digital traces, checked hospitals, clinics, even community shelters. Nothing. She had vanished like smoke. Each night he returned to the suite. Still booked, still untouched. He refused to leave. The room reminded him of her. The teacups, the chair by the window, the echo of soft footsteps that never returned. One afternoon he sat on the hotel rooftop with his closest confidant, Toby. She left without a word. Kairo muttered, rubbing his temples. Are you sure it wasn't fear? Toby asked. Maybe she thought she didn't belong. She belonged more than anyone ever did. Then why didn't you tell her? Kairo said nothing. Toby leaned forward. If she didn't leave a message, it means she was protecting herself, not rejecting you. Kairo looked out at the skyline, his voice low. I thought I had time. Love doesn't wait, Kairo. Not forever. That night, Kairo drove back to her old street again. The rusted door was still locked. A child's toy sat forgotten in the dirt. He sat on the broken step for hours, phone in hand, hoping, praying for a message. None came. But the next morning, a small envelope arrived at the front desk. No return address, just his name, written in familiar handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside a note. You gave me hope when I had none. But I need to find my own strength before I can stand beside you. D. Kairo stared at it, heart hammering. She was alive. She was still out there. And though she had walked away, she hadn't closed the door completely. Now it was his turn to fight. Not for a deal, not for an empire, but for the girl who made his silence feel like peace. Months later, the world had moved on. Business boomed again. Kairo's face returned to magazine covers. Forbes called him the relentless visionary. But none of that mattered. The note from Dara stayed folded in his wallet. He read it every night like a prayer. Then one Saturday morning, while attending a small community tech outreach event in a small town, something caught Kairo's eye. Not a person, a notice board. Pinned to it was a school flyer, slightly crumpled but clearly printed. Evening literacy classes. Free for girls, volunteer-led, at St. Grace Primary School. And beneath it, in small handwritten script, taught by Miss Dara Omasanya. He froze. Dara? He turned to a young teacher nearby, pointing at the flyer. Do you know who this is? The woman smiled warmly. Oh, Miss Dara. She's wonderful. She used to work here part-time as a cleaner. Then she started helping some of the girls with homework after school. Kairo's chest tightened. The teacher went on. Now she teaches literacy classes 3 times a week. She doesn't get paid much, but she's committed. Says no girl should grow up without learning how to read. Like she almost did. Kairo leaned forward. Is she here now? She comes in the evenings, the teacher said. Always wears this small silver necklace. You'll know her when you see her. Kairo stepped back, stunned. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't run. She had stayed and grown. The sun was setting when Kairo returned to the school. He waited quietly near the gate, heart beating fast. Children laughed in the background. A chalkboard squeaked. The air smelled of dust and hope. Then he saw her. Standing by the classroom door, Dara held a book in one hand, her other hand resting gently on a little girl's shoulder. She was smiling, softly, kindly. She looked tired but peaceful. When the last child left, she turned to close the door and saw him. Her whole body froze. "Kairo!" He stepped forward slowly. "Hi, Dara." She blinked, confused. How did you find me?" He smiled a little. "You taught me something, to look past what's fancy. I just followed the light." Dara looked down, shaking her head. "You shouldn't be here. I had to see you." She crossed her arms, trying to stay strong. "You're a billionaire. I'm just a cleaner who used to clean your hotel room." He stepped closer. So we're not from the same world, Kairo. Your mother made that clear." "She was wrong. She's powerful. She won't accept someone like me. I don't need her permission," he said quietly. Dara turned her face away. "You don't understand. I don't belong in your life. I don't wear designer dresses. I don't go to big meetings. I can't sit at your table." He looked at her for a long moment, then pointed gently at her neck, the silver necklace. "She said you didn't care, that I meant nothing to you, but you're still wearing it." Dara touched the necklace slowly, her fingers trembling. "I told myself to throw it away," she whispered. "So many times. But I couldn't, because even when I left, I still loved you." Cairo's voice broke. "And I never stopped loving you." They stood in silence, the sky turning gold behind them. Finally, Dara stepped forward, her eyes wet, her voice quiet. "So what now?" He reached out, took her hand gently. "Now," Kairo said. "We write our own story. No mothers, no titles. Just us." They didn't rush back to the city. For a few weeks, Kairo and Dara stayed in the quiet town. No cameras, no headlines, no whispers behind their backs. Just peace. In that quiet, Kairo discovered things he never had time for. He walked barefoot down dusty roads with Say chasing butterflies beside him. He helped Dara wash dishes by hand and laughed when he dropped a plate. He ate homemade meals, simple rice and beans, fried plantains, and swore they tasted better than anything his private chef ever made. He slept in a small room with a shaky ceiling fan and woke to the sound of birds, not business calls. And Dara? For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to shrink herself. She let him see the parts of her she used to hide. The fear, the strength, the dreams too big to say out loud. And he shared his too. The pressure of always being perfect, the fear of failing in front of the world, and how lonely wealth could feel. At night, they sat outside under the stars, with the sound of crickets filling the air. They didn't talk about boardrooms or backgrounds. They talked about who they were becoming. And slowly, without pressure, their love deepened. Not as a billionaire and a former cleaner, but as two people who had been broken in different ways and were learning how to heal together. A month later, the Grand Crystal Hotel was buzzing again. Not with gossip, but with camera flashes. Reporters lined the front entrance. Guests craned their necks. The staff whispered with wide eyes. Because this time, the billionaire wasn't arriving alone. Kairo Adelaya stepped out of the black SUV in a tailored navy suit. Classic, sharp. Beside him walked Dara, in a pale blue dress, simple flats, and that same silver necklace. She didn't cling to him. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply walked beside him. Calm, steady, sure. The headlines the next day read, Kairo Adelaya's surprise, the woman who changed the billionaire's life, isn't who you'd expect. They didn't care. They had nothing to prove. Inside the hotel, staff stood frozen. Some bowed. Others looked away. Dara's former supervisor fumbled her clipboard. Kairo greeted them all politely, then turned to Dara. "Ready?" She nodded. They were here for a charity gala, one Kairo had insisted be held in support of community education programs. Programs Dara helped design. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted results. He gave her both. Later that night, as the ballroom lights dimmed and the applause rose for the final speech. Kairo stepped onto the stage. He didn't speak about profits. He didn't talk about tech. He simply said, "I met someone who reminded me that kindness doesn't wear a suit, that strength doesn't come from money, and that love often walks in when you're not looking." The crowd fell silent. Then slowly, it stood. Dara, standing near the back, didn't cry. She simply watched him, steady, proud, and calm, with the same quiet fire that once lit her way through the hardest days. After the gala, they walked outside hand in hand. No guards, no noise. Just two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of ways. "I still think it's funny," Dara said with a smile. "What is?" "How all this started with me falling asleep in your bed." Kairo chuckled. "Best accident of my life." And as the city lights blinked behind them, they stepped into the night, not as billionaire and cleaner, but as equals, as home. The end. If you love this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories like this one.